The red dust of New Mexico territory hung in the air like a curtain between the living and the dead. It was late autumn of 1878, and the land stretched out beneath an unforgiving sun, cracked and thirsty as the souls who tried to tame it. The ranch sat lonely against the horizon, its weathered boards the color of dried blood, surrounded by nothing but sagebrush and the occasional bleached skull of cattle that hadn't survived the last drought. Ethan Roosevelt stood on his porch, squinting into the distance where the road dissolved into heat shimmer. He was a man carved from the same harsh landscape, tall, lean, with hands that knew rope burns and rifle stocks better than they knew comfort. The war had taken his youth, the frontier had taken his softness, and cholera had taken his wife 2 winters past. What remained was a shell of a man who spoke to his horses more than to people, who measured days not by sunrises but by chores that kept his mind from wandering to the small grave behind the barn. The dust cloud appeared first, then the figure walking through it. Not riding walking. That alone was strange enough to make Ethan straighten from his lean against the porch post. Out here, people without horses were either desperate or dead, sometimes both. As the figure drew closer, he could make out details: a woman, young but not a child, wearing a dress that had once been blue but was now the color of the road. She carried nothing but a cast-iron skillet in one hand and dignity in her spine. Her dark hair was pinned up in a style that suggested she'd once known better times, though the desert had long since claimed any pretense of gentility. She stopped at the gate, not presuming to come closer without invitation. Smart, or experienced with the ways men could be when they lived too long alone. "Afternoon," Ethan called, his voice rusty from disuse. "Afternoon," she returned. Her voice carried the hint of education, though roughened by dust and circumstance. She didn't smile, didn't plead, just stood there with that skillet like it was a credential. "You lost?" "No, sir, looking for work." Ethan almost laughed. It had been so long since the sound had escaped him that he'd forgotten how. "This ain't no place for—" He stopped, catching himself before he could say, "a woman." The frontier had taught him that women could be tougher than any man, given cause. "I don't talk much, mister, but I can cook." She lifted the skillet slightly, as if that explained everything. Maybe it did. "Name's Roosevelt, Ethan Roosevelt." He descended the steps slowly, buying time to think. He didn't need help, didn't want it. Had managed 2 years of beans and hardtack just fine, but something in her stance, the way she held that skillet like a weapon and a promise, made him pause. "Clara Jefferson," she said. "Most recently of Socorro, before that Las Cruces, before that." She shrugged. The list was long. He gathered, the story behind it longer still. "Can't pay much. Don't need much. Roof and meals, maybe $1 a week if you can spare it." He studied her. She was perhaps 25, with the kind of face that would have been called handsome rather than pretty. Sun had kissed her skin darker than fashion would approve, and her hands showed calluses that matched his own. But it was her eyes that decided him gray as storm clouds, holding neither hope nor despair, just a steady determination to survive another day. "Kitchen's through there," he said finally, nodding toward the house. "Been closed up since—" He didn't finish. Didn't need to. Every ranch had its ghosts. Clara Jefferson nodded once and walked past him. Not too close, maintaining that careful distance that spoke of hard-learned lessons. At the door, she paused, looking back. "I'll need to air it out first, and supplies flour, lard, salt at the least. There's credit at Morrison's in town. Tell him I sent you." She disappeared inside, and Ethan found himself alone again with the wind and dust. But something had shifted, subtle as a change in wind direction. The ranch felt different with another heartbeat under its roof, even if that heart was as guarded as his own. He heard windows being opened, the scrape of furniture being moved. Then nothing for a long while. When he finally went to check, he found her standing in the middle of the kitchen, perfectly still, that skillet held loose in her hand. The room was thick with memories, his wife Margaret's apron still hanging on its hook, her recipe box gathering dust on the shelf. "I can work around them," Clara said quietly, not turning. "The memories. I've had practice." Ethan swallowed hard. "Do what you need to." She nodded and set the skillet on the stove with a definitive clang. "I'll have supper ready by sundown. Nothing fancy first night. Biscuits and gravy. Maybe, if that suits." "That suits." He left her to it, returning to the endless tasks that kept a ranch breathing. Mending fence, checking water troughs, moving cattle to better grass. But his mind kept drifting to the sounds coming from the house, the pump handle working, the clatter of pans, the creak of floorboards under unfamiliar feet. Life sounds. He'd forgotten how much noise living made. As the sun began its descent, painting the desert in shades of copper and gold, the smell reached him. Baking. Actual baking, not the scorched attempts he'd made at cornbread. His stomach clenched with something between hunger and memory. The kitchen, when he entered, had transformed. Not dramatically, she hadn't moved Margaret's things, as promised. But the surfaces were clean, the stove glowing with purpose, and the table set with 2 plates instead of his usual one. Clara stood at the stove, sleeves rolled up, a streak of flour across her forehead. She'd found an old apron somewhere, worn but clean. "Sit," she said without turning. "It's ready." The biscuits were golden. The gravy thick with bits of salt pork she'd discovered in his meager stores. It was simple food, frontier food, but prepared with a competence that spoke of years of practice. Ethan ate in silence. She the same, but it wasn't the oppressive quiet he'd grown accustomed to. It was the quiet of 2 people who understood that words were currency not to be spent lightly. "Good," he said finally, pushing back his empty plate. "Kitchen needs supplies," she replied. "Flour's near Weevily, lard's rancid, salt pork's the only thing that's lasted. Make a list, I'll ride to town tomorrow." She nodded, already clearing plates with movements efficient as a dancer's. He watched her work, noticed the way she favored her left side slightly, the faded bruise on her wrist just visible beneath her sleeve. Stories there, written in scar tissue and careful movements. "Barn's got a lean-to on the east side," he said abruptly. "Used to be for the help, back when I had any. Roofs sound. Got a stove. You can make it yours if you want. Better than the house for privacy." She paused in her washing, hands still in the water. "That's kind." "That's practical. We hardly know each other." "No," she agreed. "We don't." They finished the evening chores in that same companionable silence. She helped without being asked, knowing somehow what needed doing, bringing in wood for the stove, securing the chickens for the night, checking the windows against the cold that would come with darkness. By full dark, she'd settled into the lean-to with a minimum of fuss, taking only a lantern and the quilts he offered. Ethan stood on his porch again, smoking his pipe and watching the yellow glow from her window. The ranch felt different already, as if her presence had awakened something that had been sleeping, or dying. He thought of Margaret, wondered what she'd make of this strange arrangement. But Margaret had been a practical woman above all else. She'd understand the need for help, for human voices to break the silence that pressed down like a physical weight. A coyote called in the distance, answered by another. The night sounds of the desert began their chorus owls and crickets and the rustle of small things hunting and being hunted. But underneath it all, he could hear the faint clink of Clara settling in, arranging her few possessions, making a nest in this harsh land that broke people as easily as it broke promises. Tomorrow, there would be questions. From her, from the townspeople when he showed up buying more than his usual bachelor supplies. There would be adjustments and accommodations, the careful dance of 2 wounded creatures learning to share space. But tonight, for the first time in 2 years, Ethan Roosevelt went to bed with the smell of fresh biscuits in his house and the knowledge that come morning, Someone else would be waking up on his land. It wasn't comfort exactly. It might not even be hope, but it was something. And in the brutal mathematics of frontier survival, something was always better than nothing. The wind picked up, rattling the windows and sending tumbleweeds scratching across the yard like the fingers of the dead. But inside the house and the lean-to, two small fires burned against the darkness, and the ranch that had been dying slowly began, perhaps, to live again. The first week passed in careful rhythms. Clara rose before dawn, the kitchen windows glowing like eyes in the darkness as she worked. By the time Ethan emerged for morning chores, coffee waited strong, black, better than anything he'd managed alone. They'd nod, exchange perhaps a dozen words about weather or tasks, then separate to their labors. But the house was changing, not in ways a casual visitor might notice, but in small resurrections. The iron stove, which had been cold so long it had forgotten its purpose, now hummed with life from before sunrise past sunset. The smell of baking bread replaced the stale air of abandonment. Even the walls seemed to straighten, as if remembering they sheltered the living, not just the grieving. It was the 8th morning when the first crack appeared in their mutual armor. Ethan entered the kitchen to find Clara standing before the stove, perfectly still, a mixing bowl clutched against her chest. Her eyes were closed, tears tracking silent paths through the flour dust on her cheeks. "Miss Jefferson," she startled, nearly dropping the bowl. "I'm sorry, the smell?" She wiped her face with her sleeve, leaving more flour streaks. "My mother made cinnamon rolls on Sundays. I found some cinnamon in the back of your cupboard, and I thought—" She straightened, armor reassembling. "I'll get back to work. My wife," Ethan heard himself say, used to sing while she cooked. Hymns, mostly. Sometimes just humming. He poured himself coffee, not looking at her. "House feels wrong without it?" Clara nodded slowly. "Music helps. With the remembering?" They stood there, two people caught in the amber of their losses, until the smell of something burning broke the spell. Clara whirled back to the stove, rescuing biscuits just in time. "You could," Ethan said gruffly, heading for the door. "Sing, if it helps." He didn't wait for an answer, but that afternoon, while mending harnesses in the barn, he heard it, a voice lifted in tentative melody, old songs about faraway homes and loves left behind. The sound wrapped around the ranch like a blessing, or perhaps a beginning. The change came gradually after that. Their morning nods became brief conversations. Their evening silences grew warmer, less guarded. Clara began adding touches to meals that spoke of care beyond mere duty wildflowers in a cracked vase. Butter molded into small stars. Preserves she'd discovered hidden in the root cellar served in Margaret's good china. She wouldn't mind, Clara said one evening, catching Ethan's look at the familiar dishes. The pretty things going unused, that's what kills them, not the using. Ethan found himself telling her things. Small things at first, which hen laid the most eggs, where to find the best wild onions. Then larger things, the drought 3 years back that nearly broke him, the neighbor who'd helped save what cattle survived. Never about Margaret directly, never about the fever that took her in just 3 days. But Clara seemed to understand the shape of loss without needing its details. She had her own careful revelations. Her father, Edison Jefferson, had been a railroad engineer who died in a tunnel collapse. Her mother, consumption, lingering and terrible. No siblings, no family left. The bruises and careful movements telling their own story about the spaces between then and now. "I worked respectable places at first," she said one evening. "Darning socks by lamplight, boarding houses, hotels, but a woman alone." She shrugged. "People make assumptions, act on them. That why you carry that skillet like a weapon?" A ghost of a smile. "Man comes at you unwanted in a kitchen. You use what's at hand. Cast iron makes a powerful argument." Ethan found himself almost smiling back.
Reckon it does.
The kitchen became their neutral ground, the place where guards could lower slightly. Clara taught him to read the moods of bread dough, how it fought you when overworked, yielded when treated with patience. He showed her how to judge the weather by the behavior of the cattle, which clouds meant rain and which were merely tourists passing through. "You're burning daylight watching me cook," she said one afternoon, catching him lingering in the doorway. "Learning," he corrected. "Man should know how to feed himself proper. Most men figure that's what wives are for. Most men haven't buried one." The words fell between them like stones in still water. Clara's hands paused in their kneading. "I'm sorry, that was thoughtless." "That was honest. Nothing wrong with honest." She resumed her work, but gentler now. "You loved her very much." 23 years, more than half my life." He entered the kitchen properly, settling at the table. "Met her at a church social in St. Louis, city girl. Never been west of the Mississippi. Everyone said she'd never make it out here. But she did." "She did? Better than me? Some ways. Saw beauty where I just saw hard work. Made this place a home instead of just a shelter." He picked at a knot in the table wood. "Don't know how to do that without her." "You're doing it now," Clara said quietly. "Every day you keep going, you're doing it. That your secret just keep going. Sometimes that's all there is." She shaped the dough into loaves with practiced hands, and he watched, finding peace in the simple competence of it. This too was a kind of healing, watching life continue its small ceremonies despite all loss. The real test came the third week, when Ethan returned from checking fence lines to find Clara backed against the kitchen wall, that faithful skillet raised, facing a man he didn't recognize. A drifter, by the look of him, trailed dust thick on his clothes, hunger sharp in his hollow cheeks. "Told you I ain't giving no handouts," Clara was saying, voice steady despite her defensive stance. "Pretty woman like you, all alone out here." The stranger stepped closer, and Ethan saw Clara's knuckles white on the skillet handle. "She's not alone." Both turned at Ethan's voice. He stood in the doorway, hand casual on his sidearm, expression carved from stone. The drifter's eyes darted between them, calculating. "Didn't know the place was occupied. Widow Roosevelt's been alone out here so long." "Widower," Ethan corrected coldly. "And like I said, not alone. You'd best move on." "Just hoping for a meal. Been days since—" "There's town 5 miles east. They got charity for them that ask polite." Ethan stepped aside from the door, invitation and warning clear. "This ain't that place." The man left, grumbling but subdued. Ethan watched until he was a speck on the horizon before turning back to find Clara setting the skillet down with shaking hands. "Thank you," she whispered. "You all right?" She nodded, then shook her head, then laughed a broken sound. "I hate being afraid. Hate that they can make me afraid just by existing." "Who's they?" "Men who think a woman alone is the same as a woman available, or weak, or worthless." The words came bitter. "I've been Clara Jefferson and Clara Lincoln and Clara Washington, moving on each time they got too persistent, too bold. Thought maybe this time." "This time's different." She looked at him then, really looked, searching for the lie. "How do you know?" "Because you're not alone here. Not anymore." The words surprised him with their certainty. "Anyone bothers you again, they answer to me. That's how it works now." "I don't need saving." "Didn't say you did. Said you don't stand alone. There's a difference." Clara turned away, but not before he caught the sheen in her eyes. "I should start supper." "Clara." He waited until she faced him. "You belong here. Long as you want. That's just how it is now." She nodded, unable to speak. He left her to compose herself, understanding the need for dignity in vulnerable moments. But that evening, she made his favorite pot roast with vegetables from her growing garden, and cake for dessert. though they'd agreed sweets were for Sundays only. "What's the occasion?" he asked. "Sometimes," she said, setting a generous slice before him. "You need cake on a Wednesday to remember sweet things still exist." He understood then that they'd crossed some invisible border, not into anything that had a name yet, but out of pure survival into something richer. The kitchen that had been Margaret's was becoming Clara's, not replacing but layering, like sediment in a riverbed. And he was learning to be more than just the ghost haunting his own life. That night, washing dishes side by side, she washing, he drying. A system evolved without discussion. Clara hummed again. Not hymns, but something lighter, a dance hall tune that seemed to surprise her as much as him. "My mother would be scandalized," she said, "humming such worldly music." "Good thing she can't hear then." Clara smiled, a real one this time, and for a moment the kitchen felt almost like a home again. Not the home it had been, but perhaps the home it might become. Built one shared meal, one small kindness, one careful trust at a time. The fire in the stove burned steady, casting shadows that danced like possibilities on the walls. Outside, the vast indifference of the frontier pressed against the windows. But inside, two damaged people were learning the hardest lesson the West had to teach. Sometimes the greatest courage wasn't in standing alone, but in admitting you didn't have to. The truth about Clara came out in pieces, like shards of broken pottery that only made sense when you saw how they fit together. It started with bread, always bread with her, as if she kneaded her secrets into the dough and baked them into something that could nourish instead of wound. It was a month into their arrangement, the October air sharp with the promise of winter. Clara was teaching Ethan to braid challah, a recipe she'd learned from a Jewish woman in Denver who took pity on me. Her hands guided his, showing him how to roll the strands, how to weave them without tearing the delicate dough. "You're fighting it," she said. "Bread knows when you're angry." "I'm not angry." "Your hands are—" He forced himself to relax, and she nodded approval. They worked in comfortable silence until she spoke again. So quietly, he almost missed it. "My mother died when I was 15. Father—" She paused, rebraiding a section he'd fumbled. "Father loved her too much. Couldn't live in a world that didn't have her in it. Whiskey helped at first, then laudanum, then—" She shrugged. "I kept house, kept him functioning long as I could. But the mine owners don't care if a man's grieving. You work or you don't eat." "The collapse," Ethan said, remembering what she'd told him. "No." The word came flat. "That was the story I told, easier than the truth." She stepped back, wiping her hands on her apron. "He went into the mine drunk, miscalculated a blast, took 2 other men with him." Her voice stayed steady, but her eyes were 1,000-mile stares. "Town ran me out. Daughter of a murderer. They said, didn't matter that those men had families too, that I mourned them same as him." Ethan's hands stilled on the dough. "How old were you?" 17. "Christ." Blasphemy doesn't help, but there was no heat in it. I learned quick enough. Pretty girl on her own, no family, no reputation. There's a mathematics to survival. You work respectable until someone decides you're not. Then you move on. New name, new story, new chance to fail. "You haven't failed." She laughed, but it was broken glass. "Haven't I 28 years old, no home, no people, nothing but a skillet and recipes from women who pitied me enough to teach me their secrets. You have a home now." The words hung between them. Clara's hands trembled as she adjusted the bread for its final rise. "For how long?" she whispered. "Until someone recognizes me, until another drifter comes calling, until you decide a woman with my past isn't fit for your kitchen. That's not... My name isn't even Jefferson." The confession burst out like water through a dam. "It's Franklin. Clara Franklin. But that girl died in Colorado with her father's reputation. I've been nothing but ghosts ever since." Ethan turned to face her fully. She stood rigid, waiting for judgment, for the words that would send her packing. Instead, he returned to the bread, picking up where he'd left off. "My wife's name was Margaret," he said conversationally. "Margaret Ann Roosevelt, maiden name Buchanan, born in St. Louis to a banker and his wife, educated at a finishing school, could play piano and speak French." He shaped the dough with careful attention. "You know what she said the first time she saw this place?" Clara shook her head mutely. "Said it looked like the edge of the world, where God ran out of ideas." Then she rolled up her sleeves and asked where we kept the whitewash. His hands kept moving, muscle memory taking over. "She made 3 batches of soap before she got it right, burned every meal for 2 months, cried every night for 3. But she stayed." "She stayed, and she learned, and she made this nothing into something." He looked up then. "Just like you're doing." "It's not the same. She was respectable. She was human, scared, young, doing her best with what life handed her." He wiped his hands clean, facing her. "You think you're the only one carrying ghosts. I was at Lawrence, Kansas, during the war." Clara's intake of breath showed she understood. Lawrence, where Confederate raiders had executed men and boys, burned the town to ash. "I was 22, he continued. "Wearing Union blue, stationed there to keep the peace." His voice went flat. "Didn't keep nothing. Watched them shoot men in front of their families. Couldn't stop it. Orders were to hold position, wait for reinforcements." He turned away. "Margaret never asked why I woke screaming some nights. Never asked about the scars. Just held me till the shaking stopped." "I'm sorry. Don't want your pity. Just want you to understand we all got histories. Things we did, things that were done to us. Doesn't make us worthless. Makes us survivors." Clara's composure finally cracked. She sank into a chair, tears coming silent and steady. "I'm tired of surviving. So damn tired." "I know." He poured coffee, set a cup before her. "But maybe it's time to try living instead." She wrapped her hands around the cup like it was an anchor. "I don't remember how." "Neither do I, but I reckon—" He sat across from her, the table between them like a bridge. "I reckon 2 people who've forgotten might remember together, if they're patient. What if someone comes looking? What if my past? Then we'll handle it together." The word felt strange in his mouth. Foreign, but not unwelcome. "You're not Clara Franklin who's running anymore. You're Clara Jefferson, who makes the best bread in the territory and keeps this ranch fed. That's who you are now." Simple as that. Nothing simple, but it's a start. She nodded slowly, wiping her face. They sat quietly while the bread rose and the coffee cooled. "Finally," she spoke again. "My mother's name was Catherine. She sang while she worked, just like your Margaret. Taught me every recipe I know." A watery smile. "Used to say food was love you could taste, that if you cooked with care, people could tell." She was right. "I know." Clara straightened, armor reassembling but softer now. "The bread needs the oven." They worked together to finish what they'd started. The challah came out golden, perfect, filling the kitchen with warmth and the promise of sustenance as they waited for it to cool. Clara pulled something from her pocket, a worn cloth that might once have been blue. "My mother's handkerchief," she said, unfolding it to reveal delicate embroidery. "Only thing I have left. Keep thinking I should let it go, but it's yours," Ethan finished. "Nothing wrong with holding on to what's yours." She refolded it carefully, and he saw her shoulders ease, as if a weight had shifted. They ate the bread warm, with butter and the last of the summer preserves. And if it tasted of tears and truth along with wheat and salt, that only made it more real. That night, after chores were done and the ranch settled into darkness, Ethan saw Clara standing outside the lean-to, looking up at the stars. Something in her posture had changed, still watchful, but no longer poised to run. "Star watching," he called. "Remembering," she replied. "My father taught me the constellations, before when he was still himself." She pointed. "There's Cassiopeia, the vain queen, punished to spin forever in the sky. You believe that punishment forever for one mistake." She lowered her hand. "I used to. Now." She turned to him. "Now I think maybe the stars don't care about our mistakes. They just keep shining regardless." "That's a better way of thinking." "It's a Clara Jefferson way of thinking," she said, trying out the name like new clothes. Clara Franklin would have disagreed. "Then I'm glad she's gone." "Me too." The words came wondering, surprised. "Me too." She bid him good night and went inside, but not before he caught her humming again her mother's song. He'd bet, finally freed from the prison of memory. He returned to his own house, to his own ghosts, but they seemed quieter now, less accusatory. Margaret would have liked Clara, he thought, would have seen the steel beneath the sorrow, the grace within the grief. In the kitchen, the mixing bowl sat clean and ready for tomorrow's bread. The table bore new scratches from their work, fresh marks layering over old ones, history written in wood and flour, in trust offered and received. Clara Jefferson, Clara Franklin. Did the name matter when the woman was the same survivor, fighter, keeper of recipes and sorrows and one precious handkerchief? He thought not. What mattered was that she was here, teaching him to braid bread and remember sweetness, teaching him that two broken people might make something whole, not by forgetting their damage, but by choosing to build despite it. The night wind carried the sound of her singing from the lean-to, brave and clear. Ethan Roosevelt, widower, soldier, keeper of too many ghosts, stood on his porch and let the music wash over him. For the first time in 2 years, the darkness didn't press so close. Tomorrow there would be more bread to make, more truths to share, more careful steps toward whatever they were becoming. But tonight, Clara Jefferson sang, and that was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything. The past arrived on a Tuesday morning, riding a spotted mare and wearing a badge that caught the early sun like a threat. Clara saw him first from the kitchen window, a man dismounting with the deliberate care of someone who'd learned caution the hard way. Her hands stilled on the bread dough, flour motes dancing in the shaft of light between her and memory. "Ethan," she called, voice steady despite the ice forming in her chest. "Rider coming." He emerged from the barn, taking in her rigid posture, the way she'd stepped back from the window. Without a word, he moved to the door, positioning himself between her and whoever was coming. It had become their way, this wordless protection, this understanding that some threats wore familiar faces. The man approached with measured steps, spurs singing a metallic song against the hard-packed earth. He was perhaps 40, with the kind of weathered handsomeness that spoke of years under unforgiving suns. His clothes were trail-worn but quality, his gun worn low and easy. But it was his eyes that made Clara's stomach drop pale blue, like winter sky, like judgment. "Morning," the stranger said, stopping a respectful distance from the porch. "Looking for Ethan Roosevelt." "You found him?" "Name's Silas Colt, deputy out of Santa Fe." He touched his badge, the gesture casual but deliberate. "Wondering if you might help me with a matter." Clara heard her own breathing, too loud in the morning stillness. From where she stood, she could see Silas in profile, could trace the scar that ran from his left ear to his collar. She knew that scar, had watched it made, 5 years ago in a kitchen in Amarillo, when she'd fought back with the only weapon at hand, a broken bottle that had bought her freedom and marked her attacker for life. "What kind of matter?" Ethan's voice betrayed nothing. "Looking for a woman. Goes by different names. Clara Franklin, Clara Lincoln, Clara Washington. Got word she might be in these parts." Silas pulled a folded paper from his vest, shook it open, even from inside. Clara could see it was a wanted poster. She's wanted for questioning about a death in Colorado. Man named Franklin. That's so, among other things. Silas's smile was thin as wire. Seems she's left a trail of incidents: assault in Amarillo, theft in Socorro. Man in Las Cruces claims she poisoned him, though he lived to tell it. Sounds like quite a woman. That she is. Something shifted in Silas's expression, a darkness that had nothing to do with law. I've been tracking her for near 2 years now. Take it personal when someone marks me. His hand went unconsciously to the scar. You seen anyone matching her description, about 28, dark hair, gray eyes? Pretty enough, they say. Good cook. Ethan shifted his weight slightly, and Clara saw his hand move closer to his sidearm. Territories full of women could match that. They all running from something? This one's special. Silas folded the poster with deliberate care. Has a way of finding lonely men, working her way into their kitchens. Then things happen. Accidents, food poisoning, sometimes worse. That what happened in Colorado? Man put a shotgun in his mouth, but before that, he was raving about his daughter, about what she'd done. Town ran her off before we could get the whole story. Silas's eyes never left Ethan's face. Course, could be coincidence, could be grief talking, but then there's all the other stories. Clara's hands found the skillet without conscious thought. The weight of it, the cool iron against her palm, steadied her. She'd fought before, would fight again if needed, but something in Ethan's posture made her wait. Well, Ethan drawled, I'll keep an eye out. Woman like that sounds dangerous. Oh, she is. Silas mounted his horse with the same deliberate care. One more thing, she sometimes goes by Jefferson. Clara Jefferson. Thought you should know. Case she shows up looking for work. His smile was all teeth. Wouldn't want you taken in. Appreciate the warning. Silas touched his hat brim, but his eyes swept the ranch, lingering on the kitchen window where Clara had stepped back into shadow. Nice place you got here. Homey. Smoke from the chimney. Smell of fresh bread. Almost like a woman's touch. I manage. I'm sure you do. Silas turned his horse. I'll be staying in town a few days. Morrison's boarding house. If you see or hear anything, you'll be the first to know. They watched him ride away, neither moving until he was a dust cloud on the horizon. Then Ethan turned, found Clara standing in the doorway, skillet raised like a shield. It's him, she whispered. From Amarillo. I was working at the Cattleman's Hotel. He wouldn't take no for an answer. Followed me to my room, pushed his way in. I hit him with a bottle, ran, but he's not really a deputy. Can't be. Badge looked real enough. Badges can be bought or taken. She lowered the skillet slowly. The rest, some of it's true, twisted around. Father did die. I was run out of town, but the other things I never poisoned anyone. Never stole except food when I was starving. I know. How can you know? He stepped closer, gently taking the skillet from her shaking hands. Because I've watched you for 2 months. Seen how you handle knives, how you taste everything before serving it. You're no poisoner, and thieves don't work this hard for $1 a week and board. He won't stop. Men like him never stop when their pride's been hurt. Her voice broke. I should go. Tonight, before he comes back. No? The word came hard and final, surprising them both. Ethan set the skillet on the porch rail, his movements deliberate. No, he repeated. You don't run anymore. This is your home. We defend what's ours. You don't understand. He'll make trouble, turn the town against us. He's got the law on his side, even if it's bent law. Then we'll handle it, together. He touched her shoulder, felt her trembling. Clara, look at me. She raised her eyes, tears threatening but not falling. You belong here, he said firmly. That's not changing because some bastard with a grudge comes calling. We'll go to town tomorrow. Talk to Judge Darwin. He's fair, and he's known me since I settled here. If this Silas is really law, there'll be proper procedures. If he's not. If he's not, he's more dangerous than you know. I've known dangerous men. Fought them. Buried some. His hand squeezed her shoulder gently. I'm not letting anyone drive you off. Not from my land. Not from... He paused, searching for words. Not from my life. The tears came then, silent but flowing. Why? Why does it matter? You know why. And perhaps she did, because she leaned into him then, just for a moment, her forehead against his chest. He smelled bread and soap and the lavender she'd started growing by the kitchen door. Felt her breathing steady against him, drawing strength or offering it, he couldn't tell which. All right, she whispered. All right, we face it. The rest of the day passed in tense preparation. Ethan cleaned and oiled his rifles, checked ammunition. Clara cooked with fierce concentration, filling the house with good smells as if she could ward off evil with sustenance. They spoke little, but moved around each other with the harmony of long partnership. That evening, as they sat down to supper, a horse approached, both tensed. But it was only Tom Harrison from the neighboring ranch. His young face creased with concern. Ethan, he said, declining to dismount. Thought you should know. That deputy that was here, he's been asking questions in town. About you, about any woman working out here. That's so. Morrison told him you've been buying extra supplies. Someone else mentioned seeing smoke from your kitchen early mornings. Tom shifted uncomfortably. He's also been drinking, heavily, and talking. Says he's hunting a dangerous woman, but the way he describes what he'll do when he finds her. The young man's face flushed. Ain't lawful. What he's saying. Appreciate you riding out, Tom. There's more. Judge Darwin's out of town. Won't be back for a week. And Sheriff Grant, Tom spat. Grant's drinking with him. Thinks the whole thing's amusing. After Tom left, they sat in heavy silence. Clara pushed food around her plate, appetite gone. I could still run, she said quietly. Lead him away from here. You could, but you won't. Ethan's certainty surprised him. Because that's not who you are anymore. Clara Franklin might have run. Clara Jefferson stands and fights. With what a skillet against a man with a badge and a grudge. With the truth. With friends, Tom's not the only neighbor who'll stand by us. With the law. When Judge Darwin returns. He paused. And if none of that works, with lead. She looked at him then, really looked, and saw not just the quiet rancher, but the soldier he'd been. The man who'd survived Lawrence, who'd built this ranch from nothing, who'd buried a wife and kept living. There was steel under his stillness. Forged in losses she was only beginning to understand. You do that, risk everything for a woman who's been nothing but lies and false names. I'd do it for Clara Jefferson, who makes bread that tastes like hope, who sings when she thinks I'm not listening, who's teaching me to live again instead of just survive. He met her eyes steadily. Unless that's a lie too. No, she whispered. That's the only truth I have left. A sound made them both turn horses. Multiple. Approaching fast. Ethan rose, reaching for the rifle by the door, but relaxed as riders became visible. Tom Harrison again, but not alone. With him rode 6 others neighboring ranchers, men Ethan had known for years. Evening, Ethan, called Ben Morgan, the eldest. Tom here told us you might be having some trouble with a self-proclaimed deputy. Might be. Ethan allowed. Well, we figured we'd ride over, make sure everything was peaceful-like. Ben's weathered face was carefully neutral, but his hand rested on his sidearm. Man starts bothering honest folk, threatening women folk. Well, that ain't the frontier way. Clara appeared in the doorway, and several hats came off despite the circumstances. Ma'am, Ben said. Tom's wife, Sarah, wanted you to know she's hoping you'll share that cornbread recipe at the next church social. Said she's never tasted better.
Of course.
Clara's voice was wondering. Glad to hear it. Be good to have another woman at the socials. Margaret's absence has been felt. Ben's eyes moved between her and Ethan, understanding more than was said. You folks need anything tonight, you holler. Sound carries far out here. We'll be listening. They rode off, but their message was clear. Clara Jefferson had neighbors now, had people willing to ride through darkness for her safety. The frontier might be harsh, but it protected its own. I don't understand, Clara said, sinking onto the porch step. They don't even know me. They know you work hard. They know you make me less of a ghost. Out here, that's enough. Ethan sat beside her, rifle across his knees. But Ben's right about one thing. You should come to the social Sunday. Show your face. Let people see Clara Jefferson, not whatever story Silas is spreading. What if they believe him? Then we'll face that too, together. She leaned against his shoulder, a gesture that would have been unthinkable weeks ago. I'm scared. Good. Scared keeps you sharp, but scared doesn't mean alone. They sat together as darkness deepened, watching the road. Inside, bread cooled on the counter. The ordinary made precious by threat. Above, stars emerged one by one, each a small defiance against the dark. Tell me about the church socials, Clara said eventually. What should I bring? Something that shows who you are, the real you. Apple turnovers, she decided. My mother's recipe, the one thing I've never changed, no matter what name I was using. Then that's what you'll bring. The night passed peacefully, but both knew it was the calm before storm, somewhere in town. Silas Colt drank and planned and nursed old wounds, but here, in this kitchen that had known loss and was learning hope, two people held vigil against the darkness. Clara Jefferson. The name felt more real with each passing hour, each small act of courage. Perhaps identity wasn't about the past after all, but about the choices made in present moments. The choice to stay, to trust, to let neighbors ride to your defense, to bring apple turnovers to a church social despite the deputy who might be waiting. Ethan, she said as dawn began to pink the eastern sky. Yeah, thank you for believing Clara Jefferson exists. She does exist. I'm looking at her. And in that moment, with danger circling and the future uncertain, Clara Franklin finally, truly died. What remained was a woman with flour under her nails and steel in her spine, ready to fight for the home she'd found and the man who'd helped her find it. The sun rose on a new day, and Clara Jefferson rose to meet it. The church social dawned bright and merciless, the kind of New Mexico morning that offered no shadows to hide in. Clara stood before Margaret's mirror, now hers. She supposed, adjusting the collar of her best dress. It was simple blue calico, nothing fancy, but clean and pressed. Her hands trembled as she pinned up her hair. You look fine, Ethan said from the doorway. He wore his town clothes, black wool that made him look like the cavalryman he'd once been. Better than fine? I look like a woman with secrets. You look like a woman with apple turnovers that'll make the church ladies weep with envy. He stepped closer, adjusting a pin that had come loose. Remember, you're Clara Jefferson. You work for me, been here 2 months. That's all anyone needs to know. She nodded, gathering the basket where her turnovers lay wrapped in clean cloth. The sweet smell of cinnamon and apples filled the wagon as they rode to town, each bump in the road matching the rhythm of her anxious heart. The church sat white and modest at the town's heart, surrounded by wagons and horses and the chatter of community. Clara saw familiar faces from Ethan's descriptions, the Harrison family, the Morgans, others who'd ridden to their defense, but she also saw strangers. And any stranger might be an enemy. Chin up, Ethan murmured, helping her down. You belong here. They hadn't taken 3 steps before Sarah Harrison descended upon them, her round face bright with genuine pleasure. "Clara, oh, I'm so glad you came. Tom's told me so much about your cooking. Is this the famous bread maker?" Before Clara could respond, she was swept into a circle of women, all talking at once, admiring her turnovers, asking about recipes. It was overwhelming and wonderful and terrifying, she answered carefully, letting Clara Jefferson speak a woman who knew cooking, who worked hard, who was grateful for community. "You must give me your secret for keeping bread fresh," urged Mrs. Darwin, the judge's wife. "Mine goes stale so quickly in this dry air." "A slice of apple in the bread box," Clara heard herself saying, "and always wrap it in clean cloth, never directly touching wood." The women nodded sagely. And suddenly Clara was not an outsider but a contributor of wisdom. She felt herself relaxing incrementally. Though her eyes never stopped scanning the crowd, she found him by the punch bowl. Silas Colt stood easy and casual, Sheriff Grant beside him, both watching her with the patience of hunters. He'd cleaned up for the social, fresh-shaved, vest brushed, badge prominent. To anyone else, he looked respectable. To Clara, he looked like death dressed for Sunday. And Mrs. Jefferson. Clara turned to find Pastor Williams, a thin man with kind eyes and work-worn hands. "Pastor, I wanted to thank you for coming. Ethan's been too long without, well, it's good to see him among people again." The pastor's voice lowered. "I also wanted you to know that Tom Harrison spoke to me about certain concerns. You're among friends here, Mrs. Jefferson." "Miss," she corrected softly. "Miss Jefferson." "Of course. My mistake." But his eyes were knowing. "Would you perhaps help with serving? The ladies could use an extra pair of hands." It was an offer of protection, of legitimate reason to stay among the crowd. Clara accepted gratefully, soon finding herself ladling punch and slicing pies, surrounded by churchwomen who formed an unconscious barrier between her and the men's gathering. But barriers couldn't last forever. "Miss Jefferson." Silas's voice came smooth as oil. He'd approached while she was bent over the dessert table, arranging plates. Or should I say, Miss Franklin? The women around her stilled. Clara straightened slowly, meeting his pale eyes with hard-won calm. "I'm afraid you're mistaken. Sir Jefferson's the name." "Is it now?" He stepped closer, and she smelled whiskey under his Sunday cologne. Funny thing about names. They can change, but faces stay the same. Like scars. His hand went to his neck. "You remember scars, don't you?" "Step back, Colt." Ethan's voice came quiet, but carrying. He stood with Ben Morgan and two other ranchers, their positioning casual but strategic. "Just having a friendly conversation with Miss Jefferson here." Silas's smile never wavered. "Comparing memories." "Your memory seems impaired." Judge Darwin's wife interjected smoothly. She was a small woman, but her voice carried authority. "This is Miss Clara Jefferson, Mr. Roosevelt's cook. She's been here 2 months, as anyone can verify." "That's so?" Silas pulled out the wanted poster, unfolding it with theatrical care. "Because this sure looks—" A small hand plucked the paper from his fingers. 10-year-old Mary Harrison, Tom's daughter, examined it with exaggerated care. "This doesn't look like Miss Clara at all," she announced. "This woman's mean-looking. Miss Clara makes cookies and smiles when she thinks no one's watching Mr. Roosevelt." She handed the poster back with childhood's devastating honesty. "Maybe you need spectacles, Mr." Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. Silas's face darkened, but before he could respond, Pastor Williams raised his voice. "Perhaps we should remember where we are. This is a place of fellowship, not accusation. Deputy Colt, if you have official business, surely it can wait until tomorrow." "Of course, Pastor." Silas folded the poster with deliberate care. Wouldn't want to disturb the peace. Just want everyone to be safe. He retreated, but Clara felt his eyes on her throughout the service that followed. She sat between Ethan and Sarah Harrison, hymnals shaking in her hands, voice barely managing the familiar songs. The pastor spoke of forgiveness, of new beginnings, of the frontier as a place where past and future met in the eternal present of survival and grace. "Let us remember," Pastor Williams said, "that we are all sinners, all seeking redemption, that the measure of a person is not where they've been, but where they're going. Not what they've done, but what they do now, in this moment, with the chances God provides." Clara felt tears threaten and blinked them back, beside her. Ethan's hand found hers, squeezed once, released. The gesture was brief but anchoring. After service came the social proper food spread on long tables, children running between adults' legs, the ordinary chaos of community. Clara's turnovers disappeared quickly, earning praise that felt like armor against Silas's lurking presence. She was refilling a platter when it happened. "You killed him." The voice came slurred but vicious. Silas had cornered her by the dessert table. Sheriff Grant conveniently turned away. "Your own father drove him to madness, then let him die." "That's not true." "No, then why run? Why all the names innocent women don't need new identities every few months?" "Hunted women do." The words came out fiercer than intended. "Women who defend themselves against men who won't hear no do." His face flushed ugly red. "You lying." "Is there a problem here?" The voice belonged to a woman Clara didn't recognize, tall, severe, dressed in expensive black. She stood with two younger women, all three radiating the kind of authority that came from money and position. "No problem, ma'am," Silas managed. "Just discussing." "I heard what you were discussing." The woman's eyes were steel. "Rather inappropriate for a church social. Wouldn't you say, Clara dear? Would you show me where you got those delightful turnovers? I simply must have the recipe." It was a dismissal and rescue combined. Clara followed the woman gratefully, aware of Silas's burning gaze. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me yet." The woman's voice was crisp. "I'm Mrs. Carnegie. These are my daughters. We own the largest ranch east of here, and I make it my business to know everyone's business." She studied Clara with sharp eyes. "You're not the first woman to arrive in this territory with more past than future. Won't be the last. Question is, what do you plan to do about it?" I don't understand." "That man's been spreading poison about you for 3 days. Half the town thinks you're a murderer. The other half thinks you're a saint for putting up with him. Can't stay balanced on that fence forever. What do you suggest?" Mrs. Carnegie smiled, and it was a warrior's expression. "You fight back, with the truth. Not all of it, Lord knows we're all entitled to our secrets, but enough to show his lies for what they are." Before Clara could respond, a commotion erupted near the church steps. Ethan and Silas faced each other, both men tense as drawn bowstrings. "You're harboring a criminal, Roosevelt," Silas was saying, loud enough for all to hear. "Your judgment's compromised. Lonely widower. Pretty woman, I understand the temptation, but choose your next words careful like." Ethan's voice was death quiet. "You're talking about a lady. In front of the ladies. At a church." "Ladies?" Silas laughed ugly. "She's no lady. She's a—" Ethan's fist connected with Silas's jaw before the word could emerge. The deputy went down hard, hat rolling in the dust. Sheriff Grant started forward, then stopped as Ben Morgan and 4 other ranchers stepped up beside Ethan. "Man insults a woman at a church social," Ben said conversationally. "He gets what's coming. That's frontier justice." Silas struggled to his feet, blood on his lip, hand going for his gun. "You'll regret that, Roosevelt. I'll have you in jail for—" "For what?" Judge Darwin's voice cut through like a blade. The judge had arrived late, still in traveling clothes, but his authority was absolute. For defending a woman's honor, that's no crime I recognize. Judge. Silas straightened, trying to recover dignity. This woman is wanted. Show me the warrant. Silence. I said, show me the legal warrant. Not a wanted poster, not hearsay. A proper warrant, signed by a judge, specifying charges. Silas's jaw worked. I'm gathering evidence. Then gather it elsewhere, until you have proper papers. You have no authority to harass citizens of my jurisdiction. Judge Darwin's eyes were cold. And Deputy Colt, I'll be wiring Santa Fe about you. Verify your credentials. Make sure everything's proper. The threat hung clear. Silas looked around, found no support. Even Grant avoiding his eyes. His gaze landed on Clara, promising vengeance before he stalked away. Well, Mrs., Carnegie said briskly. That was educational. Clara, you still owe me that recipe. Perhaps we could discuss it over tea Tuesday. My ranch, 2 o'clock. Bring that guardian angel of yours if you like. She swept away before Clara could respond. The social continued, but the mood had shifted. People approached Clara now, offering small kindnesses, a jar of preserves, an invitation to quilting circle, acknowledgement that she was, if not fully accepted, at least defended. On the ride home, Clara sat quiet, processing the day's revelations. You hit him, she said finally. He had it coming. You risked everything, your reputation, your freedom. No. Ethan's voice was firm. He risked everything when he threatened what's mine. The word hung between them, loaded with possibility. Yours, she whispered. He pulled the wagon to a stop, there on the empty road with the sun painting the desert gold and red. If you'll have it so, I'm not good with words. Clara, don't know how to court proper, but I know this you walk into my kitchen that first day was the first time I'd felt alive since Margaret died. You being there, singing, cooking, just being, it's like color coming back to a world gone gray. Ethan, I know you got secrets, hurts, things you're running from. Don't care. We've all got our ghosts. But maybe, he turned to face her fully, maybe we could face them together, build something new from all these broken pieces. Clara felt tears come, didn't try to stop them. I don't even know who I am anymore. Franklin, Jefferson, all these names. I know who you are. His hand covered hers. You're the woman who makes bread sing, who brings gardens back to life, who stands tall even when she's terrified. That's who you are. The name's just letters. He won't stop. Silas, he'll be back. Then we'll be ready, together. The word again, together. Such a simple word to carry such weight. Clara turned her hand palm up, laced her fingers through his. All right, she whispered. Together. They drove the rest of the way in silence. But it was a different silence than before. It held promise now, and possibility, and the first fragile threads of a future neither had dared imagine. As they reached the ranch, Clara saw something new on the horizon riders approaching. Her body tensed, but Ethan squeezed her hand. Carnegie Ranch hands, he identified, probably with a message from the matriarch. Indeed, the lead rider tipped his hat. Mr. Roosevelt, Miss Jefferson, Mrs. Carnegie wanted you to know she's arranged for some of our boys to patrol this area regular-like, just being neighborly. She also said to tell Miss Jefferson that Tea Tuesday isn't a request, it's a summons. He grinned. Her words, ma'am, not mine. After they left, Clara looked at Ethan wonderingly. Why would she do that? Because she recognizes something in you. Same thing I do, same thing Sarah Harrison and the others do. He helped her down from the wagon. You're a fighter, Clara Jefferson, and out here, fighters take care of their own. That night, as Clara prepared dinner in the kitchen that had become hers, She thought about names and identity and the strange alchemy of belonging. She'd been so many people, worn so many masks. But here, in this place, with this man, she was discovering something new, not another false identity, but perhaps, finally, her true self. The bread rose in its patient way. The stew simmered with herbs from her growing garden. And when Ethan came in from evening chores, she met him with a smile that belonged to no one but Clara Jefferson, whoever that woman was becoming. "Smells like home," he said, washing up at the basin. "Yes," she agreed, tasting the truth of it. "It does." Outside, the desert settled into night, vast and indifferent. But inside, two people shared a meal and the quiet understanding that some battles were worth fighting, some places worth defending, some connections worth the risk of believing they could last. Clara Jefferson set the table with Margaret's good dishes, no longer afraid of disturbing ghosts. The past was what it was, but the future was theirs to write. The letter from the bakery arrived on a Thursday morning, delivered by a nervous boy who wouldn't stay for the coffee Clara offered. She read it, standing in the kitchen doorway, October wind tugging at the paper like eager fingers. "What is it?" Ethan asked, seeing her face. "Mr. Morrison from town. He's offering me a position, running a bakery he's opening next to the general store." Her voice came hollow with shock. "Full partnership after a year if it succeeds. My name on the sign, Jefferson's Bakery." Ethan set down his coffee cup with careful precision. That's a good opportunity." Yes. They stood in silence, the letter between them like a chasm. Finally, Clara folded it, tucked it in her apron pocket. "When does he need an answer?" 2 weeks. "You should think on it." I should. But thinking was all she did for days. The letter seemed to burn in her pocket as she kneaded bread. Its presence a constant reminder of choices unmade. A bakery of her own, it was everything she'd dreamed of during those desperate years of running. Respectability, security, a name on a sign that no one could take away. "The tea with Mrs. Carnegie only complicated matters." "So," the formidable woman said, pouring from a silver service that looked wildly out of place in the frontier parlor. "Morrison's made his offer." "How did you—" Clara stopped. "Of course you know." "I know everything worth knowing in this territory, Mrs. Carnegie studied her shrewdly. "It's a good offer. Morrison's no fool. He's seen what you can do with flour and fire. Bakery would succeed, no question. But nothing? I'm not here to tell you what to do. Lord knows I've had enough of people doing that in my lifetime." She sipped her tea. "I will tell you a story, though, about another woman who came west with nothing but determination." Clara waited. 25 years ago, I arrived in this territory with a husband who had big dreams and small sense. We had money, Eastern money, but he lost most of it in foolish schemes. Mining ventures that found nothing but dirt. Cattle deals that went bad. He died 10 years back, left me with 3 daughters and a ranch hemorrhaging cash. "But you saved it." "I did. Learned cattle, learned men, learned when to fight and when to bend." Mrs. Carnegie's eyes were distant with memory. "Had offers along the way, good ones. Marriage proposals from men who'd have taken the burden. Buyout offers from bigger ranches. Even had an aunt back east begging me to come home. Run her millinery shop." "Why didn't you?" "Because I'd bled for that land. Buried a husband and 2 sons in that soil. Every fence post, every well, every head of cattle carried my sweat and tears. Leaving would have meant all that suffering was for nothing." She set down her cup with a decisive click. "But that's my story. Yours might be different." "I don't know what my story is anymore." "Then perhaps it's time to decide." Mrs. Carnegie leaned forward. "That man Colt, he's been quiet since the social, but he hasn't left town. Still asking questions. Judge Darwin's telegram to Santa Fe came back interesting. Seems Deputy Colt does exist, But he's been on personal leave for near 2 years, chasing his own ghosts. Clara's hands clenched in her lap.
He won't stop?
No, men like that never do. Question is, what are you going to do about it? That night, Clara stood in her garden. She realized, with herbs and vegetables she'd coaxed from the unforgiving soil, the moon was new, leaving the stars to light the desert. Behind her, the kitchen windows glowed warm, and she could hear Ethan moving about, the comfortable sounds of evening routine. "Can't sleep," his voice came soft from the darkness. "Thinking." He joined her, bringing a shawl that he draped over her shoulders. They stood together, not touching but close, watching the stars wheel overhead. "You want to take it," he said, not a question.
"I don't know what I want." The words came frustrated. "All those years running, all I dreamed of was a place of my own. A business, respectability. Now it's offered and She trailed off. "And you what?" "I think about leaving here and I can't breathe." The admission burst out. "I think about not seeing you at breakfast, not hearing the cattle, not fighting this damn soil for every tomato, and it feels like dying." "Clara." "But staying means always looking over my shoulder, means bringing danger to your door. Silas won't give up. There'll be others. I'll always be the woman with too many names and not enough past." "You think I care about that?" "You should." She turned to face him, moonlight catching the tears she'd been fighting. "You're a good man. Ethan Roosevelt, you deserve better than a woman built of lies and held together by fear. Now you listen to me." His hands found her shoulders, gentle but firm. "You think you're the only one held together by fear. You think I don't wake every night wondering when God will remember he's already taken everything I loved. Once you think I don't look at you and terror fills me because I'm starting to feel things I swore were dead." His voice roughened. "We're all broken. Clara, every last soul in this territory. Difference is, some of us are trying to heal. Together." "Together," she whispered. "You keep saying that word." "Because I mean it." His hand moved to cup her cheek. "Take the bakery if you want. I'll help you move. Help you set up. Visit when I can, but don't take it because you think you're protecting me. I've been a soldier, a widower, a ghost, being a man who loves Clara Jefferson. Whatever comes with it, that's the first thing in years I've chosen for myself." The word hung between them. Love. Neither had dared speak it before. "You love me." "God help me. Yes, scars and secrets and all." "I'm trouble. Ethan, I'll always be trouble." "Good thing I'm good at trouble, then." She laughed, watery but real, and leaned into him. His arms came around her, and they stood there in the garden, two damaged souls finding shelter in each other. "I need to tell you something," she said against his chest. "About Silas, about what really happened in Amarillo." "You don't owe me." "Yes, I do. If we're doing this together, you need to know." She pulled back, met his eyes. He wasn't just persistent. He cornered me in the hotel kitchen after closing. Said things, tried to... She swallowed hard. "I fought, grabbed a bottle, swung hard, cut him bad, ran while he was bleeding." "Good." The simple approval in his voice almost broke her. The next day, he had a badge. Said I'd assaulted an officer. That's when I became Clara Lincoln. Then Washington. Then Jefferson. New name every time someone looked too long or asked too many questions. "And your father, the truth about Colorado." Clara closed her eyes. "He died in a mine accident, like I said, but it was my fault. I'd been working, saving money, was going to get us out, move somewhere he could dry out, start over. But I waited too long. One more month. I kept thinking, one more paycheck." Her voice broke. "He went into that mine drunk because I wasn't there to stop him, because I was working breakfast shift at the boarding house, serving coffee to travelers while my father died in the dark. That's not your fault." "Isn't it?" She pulled away, wrapping arms around herself. Everyone I care about gets hurt. My mother, my father. Now you.
Stop. He caught her hands. Your mother died of illness. Your father died of grief and drink. Neither of those were your doing. And me, I'm not hurt. I'm alive. For the first time in 2 years, I'm alive.
But Silas
is a bitter man chasing shadows. We'll deal with him. Judge Darwin's already questioning his authority. Mrs. Carnegie's got half the territory watching for trouble. And if he comes here, Ethan's face hardened. I've protected what's mine before. I'll do it again. A sound made them both turn horses approaching fast. Hoofbeats thunder in the still night. Ethan pushed Clara behind him, hand going to the gun he always wore now. But the riders who emerged from darkness wore familiar faces, Tom Harrison and Ben Morgan. Both grim. Ethan, Tom called. We got trouble. That storm building to the west, it's a big one. Worst in years, old-timers say, and Colt's been buying supplies. Rope, canvas, ammunition. Either he's planning to weather the storm, or he's planning to use it. Ben finished. Storm like that. Things happen. People go missing. Evidence washes away. Ethan nodded slowly. How long? Day, maybe 2. It's moving slow, but mean. Then we prepare. He looked at each man. I appreciate the warning. We'll spread the word. Ben promised. Anyone tries to move on your place during the storm, they'll find more than they bargained for. After they left, Clara and Ethan stood looking at the western horizon, where clouds massed like an army.
I should go,
Clara said quietly.
Leave before...
No. The word came sharp.
That's what he wants, to run you off, break what we're building.
He turned to her. You stay. We weather this storm like we've weathered everything else. Together. Together. They spent the next day preparing. Ethan secured the livestock, reinforced the barn, checked and rechecked weapons. Clara cooked, filling the cold cellar with food that would keep, baking bread like she was feeding an army. The familiar work calmed her, gave her hands something to do besides shake. Why so much food? Ethan asked, watching her pull yet another batch of biscuits from the oven.
In case neighbors need shelter. In case...
She didn't finish, but he understood. In case they were separated. In case the worst happened. Food was love. You could taste her mother's words. If something happened to her, she wanted Ethan to have that comfort as long as possible. The storm hit at dusk, coming like a living thing across the desert. Wind that could peel skin, rain that fell sideways, lightning that turned night to terrible day. They huddled in the kitchen, the sturdiest room, listening to the house groan and fight the gale. I've been thinking, Clara said, raising her voice over the wind. About Morrison's offer. Ethan waited.
I want to refuse it.
The words came sure now.
Not because of Silas, not because of fear, because this is home, this kitchen, this ranch. This is where I belong.
You sure bakery of your own? Would be empty without you arguing about my coffee being too strong. She attempted a smile. Besides, someone needs to teach you to make proper biscuits. Can't have you going back to hardtack if... When, he corrected firmly. When we get through this. A crash outside made them both jump the barn door, torn free despite reinforcement. Ethan started to rise, but Clara caught his arm. Let it go, not worth dying for. But the horses
are smarter than we are.
They'll find shelter. She pulled him back down.
Stay with me, please.
They sat close on the floor, backs against the wall, listening to the storm rage. The lamp flickered, casting dancing shadows. Clara found herself thinking of her mother, of nights huddled together during prairie storms, singing to keep the fear at bay. Without conscious thought, she began to hum, then sing, voice barely audible above the wind, old songs, lullabies, hymns half remembered. Ethan's arm came around her, pulling her close, and she felt him relax incrementally. Margaret used to sing during storms, he said. Said it confused the thunder, made it forget to be scary. Wise woman. She would have liked you, would have said you were too thin, fed you cake until you couldn't move. His voice carried fond memory. Would have loved having another woman to talk to. She missed that most, I think, the company of women. Tell me about her. So he did, there in the storm's heart. Told her about the woman who'd made the ranch a home, who'd lost 3 babies but never lost hope, who'd faced the frontier with grace and grit. And Clara told him about her mother, about recipes passed down like heirlooms, about love expressed in flour and butter and patient teaching. They were still talking when the door exploded inward. Silas Colt stood framed by the storm, water streaming from his coat, gun drawn and steady despite the wind. Touching scene, he snarled. The murderess and her protector. Almost hate to interrupt. Ethan moved to rise, but Silas cocked the hammer. Don't just sit there nice and cozy while I finish what I came for. You've got no authority here, Ethan said, voice deadly calm. Judge Darwin. Judge Darwin can't do nothing in this storm. Silas's smile was ugly. By the time it passes, won't be nothing left to judge. Tragic accident. Widow woman and her employer, swept away by flood. Happens all the time in the territories. People know you're here. They'll find your bodies miles apart. Her in the river. You buried in debris. Storm's fury. He focused on Clara, eyes glittering with old hate. But first, you and I got unfinished business. No, Clara said quietly. We don't. She stood slowly, ignoring the gun, ignoring Ethan's hiss of protest. The fear that had driven her for years was strangely absent, replaced by something harder, clearer. 5 years you've chased me, she said. 5 years of running, hiding, being afraid. But you know what I realized? You're the one who's afraid. Big man with a gun, chasing a woman because she dared fight back, because she marked you, showed the world what you really are. Shut your mouth. A coward, she continued, stepping forward. A pathetic, broken coward who needs to hurt women to feel like a man. The gun swung toward her, Silas's face contorting with rage. Clara saw his finger tighten on the trigger, saw her death in his pale eyes, but she also saw Ethan moving, using her distraction, and she smiled. The gunshot was impossibly loud in the small space, but it was Silas who staggered, looking down in shock at the spreading red on his chest. Ethan's smoking Derringer hidden, waiting, soldier's reflexes intact told the story. You... Silas dropped to his knees, gun falling from nerveless fingers. Warned you, Ethan said, cold as winter. She's under my protection. Silas toppled forward, still and silent. The storm continued its fury. But inside the kitchen, a different kind of storm had passed. Clara found herself on the floor, Ethan's arms around her, both shaking with reaction. You could have been killed, he said roughly. Standing up like that. I was tired of kneeling. She pulled back to look at him. Are you hurt? No. You... No. She looked at Silas's still form. Is he... Yes. No regret in Ethan's voice. It's done. Clara, he can't hurt you anymore. They held each other as the storm gradually weakened, its fury spent. By dawn, the winds had died to whispers, and pale sun broke through dissipating clouds. Tom Harrison was the first to arrive. Picking his way through debris, he took in the scene, the body, the broken door, the 2 survivors, and nodded grimly. Storm casualty, he suggested. Man broke in during the storm, Ethan said evenly. Had to defend ourselves. Seems reasonable. I'll fetch the sheriff. And the judge. Tom's eyes were knowing. Doubt there'll be much investigation. Man who'd break into folks' homes during a storm. Well, he gets what's coming. By noon, it was official. Silas Colt, rogue deputy. Had died attempting to rob the Roosevelt Ranch during the storm. Self-defense. Clear-cut. Judge Darwin himself closed the matter, sending word to Santa Fe that their wayward officer had met frontier justice. The ranch was a mess barn, damaged, fences down, debris everywhere. But as neighbors arrived to help with cleanup, Clara felt something lift from her shoulders, a weight carried so long she'd forgotten life without it. "You all right?" Sarah Harrison asked, finding her in the kitchen making coffee for the work crews. "I think so." Clara tested the words, found them true. "Yes, I'm all right." "Good." Sarah squeezed her shoulder. "Now, about that cornbread recipe." Life resumed its patterns, but different now. Cleaner. Clara sang while she worked, not softly but full-voiced. She walked to town with Ethan, head high, meeting eyes instead of avoiding them. The bakery position went to someone else, and Clara felt only relief. One evening, as they worked together in the garden, their garden now, Ethan cleared his throat. "Been thinking." "Dangerous habit," she teased. "About names." He knelt among the bean plants, ostensibly checking for pests. "Clara Jefferson's a fine name, but I was wondering if you might consider another change." She stilled. "What kind of change?" He pulled something from his pocket, a simple silver ring, worn smooth with age. "Roosevelt's a good name. Solid. Been thinking it might suit you." Clara's hands flew to her mouth. "Ethan." "I know it's sudden. No, we've only known each other a few months. But out here, you learn quick what matters. And what matters is I love you. Want to build a life with you. Want your bread in my kitchen and your songs in my house and your hand in mine when the storms come." He looked up at her, vulnerable as she'd ever seen him. "If you'll have me." She dropped to her knees beside him, not caring about the dirt. "You beautiful, foolish man. Yes, yes to all of it. Yes to Roosevelt and storms and forever." He slipped the ring on her finger with shaking hands. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting. It was Margaret's. He said softly, "That all right?" "It's perfect. She brought us together, in a way. Her memory kept this place alive for me to find." Clara touched his face. "I think she'd approve." "I know she would." They kissed there in the garden, surrounded by growing things and hope. When they finally stood, Clara looked at the ring catching the last light. "Clara Roosevelt," she said, trying out the name. "I like it." "Best name you've had yet," he agreed. They walked back to the house hand in hand. No longer employer and cook. No longer two broken souls hiding from the world. But something new. Something stronger. The kitchen welcomed them with the smell of rising bread and simmering stew. Clara moved to tend the stove, Ethan to wash the garden dirt from their hands. It was domestic and ordinary and perfect. "When?" she asked. "For the wedding." "Soon as you want. Tomorrow, if Judge Darwin's willing." "Next week," she decided. "Give me time to make a proper wedding cake. Our wedding needs cake." "Everything needs cake, according to you. And I'm always right." He laughed, catching her around the waist, spinning her in the kitchen that had seen so much sorrow and was learning joy. "Clara Roosevelt, you're going to be a handful." "Good thing you've got two hands, then." The sun set over the ranch, painting the desert in shades of gold and promise. In the kitchen, Clara Jefferson, soon to be Roosevelt, made bread and made plans and made peace with all the names she'd worn. They were all her, all steps on the path that led to this place, this man, this home. The storm had passed. What remained was the life that came after, built on truth, defended with courage, and seasoned with love. It would be enough. More than enough. It would be everything. The storm's aftermath brought more than debris and damaged fences. It brought clarity, sharp as the desert air after rain. Clara stood in the kitchen that had become her sanctuary, watching the sun paint the puddled yard gold. Everything looked different now, cleaner, newer, like the world had been scrubbed raw and given a second chance. "Fence is pretty well done for," Ethan reported, coming in mud-splattered and weary. "Lost 6 head of cattle. Best I can count. Could have been worse." "Could have been much worse." She handed him coffee, their fingers brushing in the exchange. The simple touch still sent warmth through her. This new permission to reach out without fear. 3 days had passed since Silas Colt died in their kitchen. 3 days of neighbor visits, of Sheriff Grant's perfunctory investigation, of Judge Darwin's quiet efficiency in closing the matter. The territorial newspaper would run a small item about a deputy killed in the storm. But the truth, their truth, would remain here, in this kitchen, between these walls. "Tom's bringing more lumber this afternoon," Ethan continued. "Ben offered his boys to help with the rebuilding. And Sarah's organizing the church women to bring food for the workers." Clara smiled. "Apparently, feeding men doing heavy labor is too much for one woman to handle." "Is it?" "No, but I won't tell them that. It's nice, being helped, being part of something." Ethan set down his cup, studied her. "How are you, truly?" She considered lying, giving the expected response, but they were past that now. She and Ethan, past pretense. "I keep waiting to feel guilty," she admitted. "A man is dead because of me, but all I feel is—" She searched for words. "Free, like I've been holding my breath for 5 years and can finally exhale. He made his choices." "Yes, and I made mine." She met his eyes. "I chose to stop running, to stand and fight, to trust you. I don't regret any of it." "Good." He reached out, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "No more looking back. We've got a wedding to plan." The word sent a flutter through her stomach. Wedding. Such a normal word for such an extraordinary thing, 2 broken people choosing wholeness together. "About that," she said. "I was thinking Saturday. Give people time to recover from the storm, but not so long that—" She stopped, seeing his expression. "What?" "Saturday's perfect." He pulled her close, and she went willingly into his arms. "Just thinking how Margaret would have teased me. Always said I was too slow to court, too careful. Took me 3 years to propose to her. And me, 3 months. He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Guess you're better at breaking down walls than you know." A knock interrupted them. Clara tensed she might be free, but the habit of fear would take time to fade. But Ethan just called out, "Come in." It was Mrs. Carnegie, sweeping in like she owned the place, which she very nearly did. She took in their embrace, Clara's ring, the general air of domestic peace, and nodded approvingly. "Good. You've sorted yourselves. Saves me the trouble of knocking sense into you both." She settled at the table without invitation. "Now, about this wedding. I assume you'll want something simple." "Yes," Clara began, but Mrs. Carnegie waved her quiet. "Simple, but proper. Church wedding, reception after. I'll coordinate with Pastor Williams. Sarah Harrison can handle the food. No, Clara, you're not cooking for your own wedding. Bad luck." She produced a small notebook, began making notes. "Dress is the issue. Nothing suitable in town. But my eldest is about your size. Her wedding dress could be altered." Mrs. Carnegie, that's too generous." "Nonsense. Things just gathering dust. Besides," her eyes softened marginally, "every woman deserves to feel beautiful on her wedding day, even especially women who've earned their happiness the hard way." Clara felt tears threaten. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. There are conditions." The older woman leaned forward. "First, you stop this foolishness about being just a cook. You'll be Mrs. Roosevelt, a rancher's wife. That means church socials, women's aid society, the whole exhausting business of being respectable." I don't know if I'm ready for that." "No one ever is. You learn by doing." Mrs. Carnegie's voice gentled. Second condition, you forgive yourself. Whatever guilt you're carrying about your past, let it go. That girl who ran, she did what she had to. This woman who stands and fights, she does what she must. Neither deserves your condemnation. The tears came then, silent but cleansing. Ethan's hand found hers under the table, anchoring her. Third, Mrs. Carnegie continued briskly. You teach my cook your biscuit recipe. Woman's been with me 15 years, but her biscuits could shoe horses. Clara laughed through her tears. That I can do. Excellent. I'll send the dress tomorrow. Saturday it is. She rose, then paused. You've chosen well, both of you. Not everyone gets a second chance at happiness. Don't waste yours. After she left, they sat in companionable silence, hands linked across the table. She's right, Clara said eventually. About second chances, I never thought... She trailed off, overwhelmed by the enormity of it. A week ago, she'd been ready to run. Now she was planning a wedding, accepting a dress from the territorial grande dame, becoming part of a community that had closed ranks to protect her. The ring, she said suddenly. Should I take it off until the ceremony? What's proper? Keep it on, Ethan said firmly. Want everyone to know you're spoken for, that you're choosing this, choosing us. The next days passed in a whirlwind. The dress arrived ivory silk with pearl buttons, only slightly out of fashion and surprisingly beautiful. Sarah Harrison descended with the church women, transforming the house with cleaning and chatter. The damaged barn became a community project, neighbors arriving with tools and expertise, refusing payment beyond Clara's coffee and sandwiches. She found herself at the center of it all. No longer the mysterious woman in Ethan's kitchen, but Clara who's marrying Ethan. Clara who makes the best pie. Clara who stood up to that awful deputy. The transformation was dizzying but welcome. Friday evening, as Clara tried on the altered dress one final time, she found a moment of quiet. Sarah had finally herded the helpers home. The house sparkled. Food filled the cellar for tomorrow's reception. Only the familiar rhythm of bread-making remained. She'd insisted on baking the rolls for the reception herself. Tradition be damned. She stood before Margaret's mirror, hardly recognizing the woman reflected there. The dress fit perfectly, making her look softer, younger. But it was her expression that startled open, unguarded, alive with possibility. Beautiful. She turned to find Ethan in the doorway, breaking the tradition of not seeing the bride before the wedding. You're not supposed to be here. Wanted to give you this. He held out a small velvet box. Something of your own to wear tomorrow. Inside lay a simple gold locket on a delicate chain. Clara opened it to find two tiny photographs, one of Ethan in his younger days, one empty. For your mother's picture, if you have one, he explained, or whatever you want to remember. Ethan. Words failed her. Every woman should have something of her past at her wedding. The good parts, anyway, the parts that made her who she is. She had no photograph of her mother, but she had something better. Carefully, she retrieved her mother's handkerchief from its place of honor, cut a small piece from the corner where the embroidery was finest. It fit perfectly in the locket's empty frame. There, she said, showing him, past and future together. He helped her fasten the chain, his fingers warm against her neck. No regrets, not about the bakery, the life you could have had. The only life I want is here. She turned in his arms, still in the wedding dress that transformed her. Though I do have one request. Anything. Can we add an oven to the summer kitchen? A proper bread oven if I'm to feed all these neighbors who keep appearing. I'll need better equipment. He laughed, spinning her carefully. Woman, you could ask for the moon and I'd try to rope it for you. Just an oven, she assured him. And maybe a bigger garden plot, and chickens that actually lay, and... He stopped her with a kiss. there in the kitchen with tomorrow's bread rising and tomorrow's dreams taking shape. "Whatever you want," he murmured against her lips.
"We'll build it together."
Saturday dawned clear and perfect, the October sky a blue so deep it hurt. Clara woke in the lean-to for the last time tomorrow. She'd wake in the house as Mrs. Roosevelt, but today demanded this last observance of propriety. Sarah arrived early with her daughters, filling the morning with feminine bustle. They braided Clara's hair with late roses from Sarah's garden, helped her into the dress, exclaimed over the locket. It was the morning Clara had never thought to have surrounded by women who'd claimed her, preparing for a wedding she'd chosen rather than endured. "Nervous?" Sarah asked as they prepared to leave for the church. "No," Clara realized with surprise, eager. The church was full, fuller than Clara had expected, certainly fuller than a simple rancher's wedding warranted. But as she stood at the door, looking down the aisle to where Ethan waited, she understood. This wasn't just their wedding. It was the community's declaration Clara Jefferson belonged here, was valued here, would be protected here. Pastor Williams beamed as Ben Morgan walked her down the aisle. She'd had no one to give her away, but Ben had volunteered with gruff kindness. The faces she passed were friendly, accepting, present Mrs. Carnegie sat in the front row like a benevolent general surveying her troops. But it was Ethan's face that held her. He stood tall and steady in his best suit, looking at her like she was miracle and sunrise combined. When Ben placed her hand in Ethan's, she felt the circle close. All the running, all the fear, all the false names they'd led her here. To this moment, this man, this choice. "Dearly beloved," Pastor Williams began, and Clara let the words wash over her. Grace, redemption, new beginnings. They all lived in this moment, in the warm pressure of Ethan's hand, in the community's witness, in the light streaming through plain glass windows. When it came time for vows, Ethan spoke clear and strong. "I, Ethan Roosevelt, take you, Clara Jefferson, to be my wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, in plenty and in want, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part." Clara's voice shook only slightly as she repeated the ancient words, but her eyes were steady on his. When Pastor Williams pronounced them man and wife, when Ethan kissed her there before God and the territory of New Mexico, she felt the last of Clara Franklin slip away like smoke. The reception was held at the ranch, tables set up in the yard, lanterns ready for when darkness fell. Clara found herself passed from neighbor to neighbor, each offering congratulations and welcome. The food was abundant, Sarah's coordination and the church women's cooking creating a feast from frontier provisions. But it was the cake that made Clara cry. 3 layers of perfection, decorated with sugar roses, a professional job that shouldn't have been possible this far from civilization. "How?" she asked Mrs. Carnegie. "Telegraphed to Santa Fe? Rush delivery on the stage? Some things are worth the expense." The formidable woman actually smiled. "Besides, you were right. Everything needs cake, especially weddings." As the sun set and the dancing began, Tom Harrison had brought his fiddle, others their guitars. Clara found herself on the porch with Ethan, stealing a moment from the celebration. "Happy?" he asked. "Complete," she corrected. "That's the word, complete." They stood together, watching their neighbors dance in their yard, celebrating their joy. Tomorrow would bring work, always work on a ranch. There would be challenges, losses, the ordinary griefs of life. But tonight, Clara Jefferson Roosevelt was exactly where she belonged. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" "For seeing Clara Jefferson when all I could see was a woman running, for giving her a home, for," she gestured at the celebration, the community, the life spread before them, for all of it. "You gave as much as you got," he pointed out. "Brought my house back to life. brought me back to life. Then we're even.
No.
He pulled her close, and she could hear his heart beating steady and sure.
We're together. That's better than even...
The music called them back to the dancing, back to their community, back to the life they were building one day. One meal, one choice at a time. Clara Roosevelt went willingly, her past reconciled, her present celebrated, her future bright with possibility. In the kitchen, bread dough rose for tomorrow's baking. The stove waited patient for her return. But tonight, Clara danced with her husband under territorial stars, finally and fully home. The morning after the wedding dawned quiet and golden, the ranch wrapped in the peculiar peace that follows celebration. Clara woke slowly, still marveling at the solid warmth of Ethan beside her, at the simple gold band on her finger that caught the early light. Mrs. Roosevelt. After all the names she'd worn, this one felt like coming home. Morning, Mrs. Roosevelt. Ethan murmured against her hair. Morning, Mr. Roosevelt. She turned in his arms, studying his face in the gentle light. No regrets in the daylight, only that we have stock to feed and fences to mend. He kissed her forehead. Real life doesn't stop for weddings. But real life, Clara discovered, was different now. She moved through her morning routine, starting the stove, making coffee, beginning bread, but everything felt transformed. This wasn't just a kitchen she worked in, it was her kitchen. The cups she set out were for her husband, not her employer. The small changes were enormous. I've been thinking, Ethan said over breakfast. About what you asked. The bread oven. It can wait. We have so much to repair after the storm. No. He set down his cup with a decision. We build for the future now. Not just patch the past. Tom knows a man in Santa Fe. Builds ovens for the hotels. I'll write today. Clara felt her throat tighten.
That would be wonderful.
Can't have my wife working with inadequate equipment? He said it casual. But she heard the pride in my wife, saw how his eyes lingered on her face. Besides, way Sarah was talking at the reception, you'll be baking for half the county soon. It proved prophetic. As the weeks passed and October gave way to November, Clara found herself at the center of an informal network. Women who'd kept their distance when she was just Ethan's cook now sought her out. Her recipes were traded like currency. Her advice on everything from bread to babies somehow valued despite her newlywed status. It's because you listen, Sarah explained one afternoon, helping Clara preserve the last of the autumn vegetables. Margaret was beloved, but she was from the city, always a little apart. You understand frontier life in your bones. Clara thought of her years running, surviving on little, making do with less. I suppose I do. Also, you stood up to a man with a gun, armed with nothing but courage and a skillet. Sarah grinned. That counts for something out here. The new oven arrived in pieces on a freight wagon, accompanied by a taciturn Italian named Leonardo who spoke little English but understood masonry like poetry. Clara watched, fascinated, as he transformed brick and mortar into her dreams made solid. Is good, Leonardo pronounced when finished, his English limited but his satisfaction clear. You make bread. Yes, good bread. The best bread, Ethan assured him, and Clara flushed with pleasure. She christened the oven with a batch of sourdough that came out perfect crispy crust, tender interior, the kind of bread that made hard life bearable. Standing in her outdoor kitchen, surrounded by the fruits of community labor neighbors had helped build a proper shelter around the oven. Clara felt wealthy beyond measure. Winter came gentle that year, as if the land was making amends for the violent storm. Clara settled into rhythms of marriage, of partnership, of belonging. She and Ethan worked side by side, rebuilding what the storm had damaged, planning improvements for spring. In the evenings, they sat by the fire, her knitting, him working leather.
comfortable in silences that needed no filling. But the past, Clara learned, never quite releases its hold. The letter came on a Tuesday in December, delivered by a passing freight driver. Clara didn't recognize the handwriting, but something about it made her stomach clench. "What is it?" Ethan asked. Seeing her face, she opened it with trembling fingers, read the brief message twice before the words made sense. "Clara Franklin," she read aloud. "I knew your father. Have information about his death you should know. We'll be passing through Springer next week. If you want the truth, meet me at Morrison's. Signed, J. Hancock." Ethan took the letter, studied it. Could be nothing. Could be someone trying to stir trouble. Could be, but Clara knew it wasn't. Something in the formal writing, the careful words, spoke of truth withheld. "You don't have to go." "No," she agreed. "I don't. Clara Franklin is dead." She took the letter back, smoothed its creases. "But maybe she deserves to know the truth before I bury her completely." They went together, of course. Ethan wouldn't hear of her facing this alone. Morrison's boarding house was busy with the usual collection of drummers and drifters, but Clara spotted him immediately, an older man. Neat despite travel wear, with the bearing of someone who'd known authority. "Miss Franklin," he rose as they approached. "Or should I say Mrs. Roosevelt now. You're well informed. I make it my business to be—" He gestured to chairs. "John Hancock. I was the mining superintendent in Colorado. Your father worked for me." Clara's hands clenched in her lap. "Then you know how he died." "I do, and I know what the town told you. But there's more." Hancock pulled out a worn notebook. "Your father was a good man, Mrs. Roosevelt. A good engineer before the drink took him, but the day he died, he was sober." The words didn't make sense. "No, he was drunk. Everyone said what I told them to say." Hancock's face was grim. "There was trouble at the mine. Cave-in risk I'd been ignoring, trying to squeeze out more ore before winter. Your father saw it, tried to warn me. I didn't listen." He met her eyes squarely. "He went down to shore up the supports himself, stone-cold sober, trying to save lives. The blast that killed him wasn't his mistake. Was the mountain giving way, just like he'd predicted?" Clara felt Ethan's hand cover hers, anchoring her as the world tilted. "But they said, the other men who died—" "We're killed by the cave-in, not the blast. Your father died trying to prevent a larger disaster. He saved 15 men that day, Mrs. Roosevelt. But I let the town blame him because—" Hancock's voice roughened. "Because it was easier than admitting I'd ignored the warnings. Because dead men can't defend themselves." "Why tell me now?" "Because I'm dying." He said it matter of fact. "Lung rot from years in the mines. Got maybe a month. Figured the truth should outlive me." He pushed a paper across the table. "Wrote it all down. Had it witnessed. Won't bring him back, but might bring you peace." Clara stared at the document through blurred vision. All those years of carrying guilt, of believing she'd let her father work drunk, of running from the shame of it, all those years, and it was a lie. "The town," she managed. "They ran me out, called me a murderer's daughter." "I know. I'm sorry." Hancock stood, suddenly looking every one of his years. "It's not enough, but it's all I have. Your father was a hero, Mrs. Roosevelt. You should have grown up knowing that." After he left, Clara sat frozen, the document clutched in her hands. Ethan waited, patient, until she was ready to move. "I don't know how to feel," she admitted as they walked back to their hotel. Angry, relieved it changes everything and nothing all at once. "You're allowed to feel all of it," Ethan said gently. "Grief doesn't follow rules." That night, in their hotel room, Clara cried for the father she'd lost twice, once to death, once to lies.
cried for the girl who'd run believing she carried bad blood. Ethan held her through it all, steady as stone.
"I want to go back," she said when the tears finally stopped. "To Colorado. Want to put flowers on his grave. Tell him I know the truth."
"Then we'll go. Spring, maybe, when the passes are clear. You do that take time from the ranch."
"Clara?"
He cupped her face gently. "You're my wife. Your ghosts are my ghosts now. We'll go. We'll make peace with it. Then we'll come home."
Home. The word settled around her like a blanket. Not Colorado, where she'd been Clara Franklin. Not any of the towns where she'd hidden behind false names. Home was a ranch in New Mexico, a kitchen with a new bread oven, a bed shared with a man who'd seen her at her worst and chosen her anyway. They returned to the ranch to find it snowed in, the first real storm of winter, but inside was warm. Neighbors having kept the fires going and stock fed. Clara threw herself into baking, feeding her emotions into flour and yeast until the house overflowed with bread.
"We'll need to eat nothing but bread for weeks," Ethan teased, surveying the bounty.
"Or share it."
Clara began bundling loaves.
"The Harrisons, the Morgans, Mrs. Carnegie, even that new family, the Lincolns, starting out in the old Peterson place."
It became her pattern that winter, baking through her feelings, sharing the results. The ranch kitchen became a gathering place. Women stopping by for coffee and conversation, recipes and comfort. Clara found herself dispensing advice she didn't know she possessed, learned from years of making do. "You've built something," Ethan told her one evening, watching her teach young Mary Harrison to braid challah. "Margaret made this house a home. You've made it a hearth for the whole community."
"We've made it," she corrected.
"None of this happens without you believing I belonged here." Spring came early, the snow melting into wildflowers that carpeted the desert in impossible colors. They made the trip to Colorado as promised, found Edison Franklin's grave, and told him the truth. Clara left her mother's handkerchief there, weighed down with stones the past finally laid to rest. On the way home, and it was home now, no question they stopped in Santa Fe. Clara had business there, plans she'd been nurturing through the winter months. "What do you think?" she asked, showing Ethan the building. It was small but solid, good location near the stage depot. "Morrison offered to back me. Not a full bakery, just a presence. Somewhere to sell what I make. Maybe teach baking classes to the hotel staff."
"Thought you didn't want a bakery." "I didn't want to leave you for a bakery," she corrected.
"This would be different. Once a week, maybe twice. Build something without abandoning what we have." He studied the building, then her face. "You've thought this through." "All winter. Figured if I'm going to be Clara Roosevelt, I should make the name mean something. The ranch is yours, ours, but this could be mine to build. Then build it. Simple as that. No conditions, no doubts, just faith in her ability to create something lasting." The shop, Roosevelt's Breads, opened in May. Clara traveled to town Wednesdays and Saturdays, sold out of everything she brought, taught eager students the secrets of frontier baking, but she was always home by evening. Back to her kitchen, her garden, her husband. "No regrets?" Ethan asked one night, finding her tired but glowing after a particularly busy day. "None," she assured him, then paused. "Well, one." "What's that?" She took his hand, placed it on her still flat stomach. "This kitchen's about to get busier. Hope you're ready for crying to go with your morning coffee." The joy on his face was answer enough. He spun her around the kitchen that had seen so much grief and fear, love and triumph, bread and tears and laughter. Now it would see new life, the ultimate affirmation that the future could be bigger than the past. "Boy or girl?" he asked when he could speak. "Doesn't matter. They'll be Roosevelt. That's all that counts." And it was, in that kitchen where Clara Jefferson had been born from Clara Franklin's ashes, where bread rose daily like hope made manifest, where community gathered and life continued its ancient patterns. It really was all that counted. They were home. They were family. They were future written in flower and love and frontier courage. It was enough. It was everything. It was perfect. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to hear where you're enjoying this tale, whether you're relaxing at home, on your commute, or perhaps winding down for the evening. Please share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this Wild West romance, don't forget to subscribe to Wild West Stories 1850 and hit that like button. And if you really want to help this story reach more listeners who love tales of frontier courage and romance, please hit the hype button. Your support means the world and helps keep these stories alive. Until next time, partners.